Okay, so welcome back. I just ran my application. It tells me that the rotation is 0, which means it's in the the portrait mode. My display size is 1080 by 2088, which is kind of weird because I scaled this guy so it fits nicely on the screen for the video. That is not a normal everyday size. And then the density. And the density thing is a little confusing because it basically tells you a relative density to what they think is standard. Now, unfortunately, what they think is standard was many, many years ago. So it's not necessarily normal. I'm just telling you. So, for example, if we go here, this is kind of what they meant. The pixel density. So we're at, what, 2.75 or something between extra high and extra high density. And so, here's like, for example, what they were thinking about. So somewhere in the vicinity of like 500 or something. I tell you what, my honest to God real phone is probably, I don't know, 800 or something. It is well beyond this, right? So most modern devices are XXX high density, and they just kind of stopped after that. And went, hey, look, man, we're not going to keep this going. We're not going to have XXXXXXXXX high density. So it's out there. That's basically all. So that measure is not something that you can actually count on. Nothing you can do math on. Now, there actually is another thing called real density that takes an API level one higher than what we're using. We're using API 16, if you recall. So if we had gone up to 17 when we built our application, we could have used yet another one called real density, and it'll actually tell you what the DPI, like 200 by 200, density, pixel density. I can't say that. Okay, so this is useful in looking at a running application to see, am I rotated? That would be handy. What is my width? That would be handy. And am I on a screen that has an awful lot of pixels, or just kind of sort of a few pixels? So that would be kind of sort of handy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make a change to our application, and we're going to do a rotation thing. Okay, now we've done rotation before, right? I mean, in fact, let's just do this one, okay, just for the heck of it, all right? So I'm going to rotate this guy, and it's not going to look hardly any different, right? No big deal. And then I'm going to rotate him back just for the heck of it, right? Okay, cool, right? Nothing? But what if I wanted it to look completely different when I rotated the screen? I mean, completely different. Not at all like this. So during a rotation, one way to do it is to check to see if are you rotated and then do something, or the other technique is to use a separate layout specifically for the size, specifically for the rotation, specifically for the density. Now, I'm not going to make one that's that complicated where it has 3 factors in it. But we can do one for rotation without too much trouble. So to make any sense of this, I'm going to have to do something. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to add me a label. I call it a label. It's basically just a plain old text view. And I'm going to put that guy immediately before my display guy, okay? Just like that. Okay, so now I'm going to grab this guy and make him a little bit bigger and change his text. So I'm just going to call this one portrait for the stuff that shows up in the text. I don't actually change the ID because I don't really care. I'm not actually going to be talking to it. I hope you can spell that right. And let's change the text size to something like 24, make it just kind of big. Okay, kind of cool. Now I'm going to add me a second one of the ET displays. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my multi-line guy and drop him onto here. And I'm going to go back and change this guy, and here we're going to call him, this one I do have to rename. I'm going to call him ET Display 2, okay? All right. Now, what I've got now is something that shows, right? So let's just run this to make sure it works, of course. It should just show the word portrait at the top, and then, oh my goodness, do I have this thing upside down? Okay, it says portrait at the top, and then the device rotation and 2 blank lines where those things go. So what pretty straightforward, right? And so when I rotate this guy, he looks identical, right? Because that's the way we've always done it. Okay. So now what we're going to do, come on, machine. I hit the rotate button. How come you're not rotating? That annoys me. What happens if I do it a second time? Yay! Okay, I don't know what happened there. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a separate version of this. I'll tell you what, before we do that, let's put some text in here that kind of makes sense of this. So I've got something in my paste buffer, so I'm just going to go here and put some stuff in. Okay, so I need me another one of these guys. Edit text et display 2. And then, of course, I have to inflate the guy. Et display 2 is equal to find view by ID. As always, r.id.et display 2. Okay, cool. And I just put some text in there so you can actually see what's going on. All right, so I'm going to run this guy. And there we go. Cool. I've got my portrait, I've got my rotation, I've got two little Mary Had a Little Lambs. Now, if I rotate this guy, I'm probably not going to be able to see it all because there's just too much stuff on the screen, right? I can't see everything there is to see. So, I need to fix that. And the way you fix that is you create a separate landscape orientation file. Basically, a separate layout file. Now, thankfully, you don't have to do this on your own. One of the things you can do is when you get to here, this little button right there talks about how to show this thing in a preview. But if you pull this guy down, it says Create Landscape Variation. Ooh, that's cool. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a landscape variation. So now I have two activity mains. One of them has in parentheses land. And over here, this one says layout activity. This one says land activity. Now, the cool thing about this is I don't have to follow the exact same thing. So, for example, here, I'm going to change the wording on this to landscape, right? So that, is a 24-point guy across the top. But since I already know this thing won't fit, right? The text won't fit, but these two displays stacked vertically. Why don't I go grab me a layout guy and grab me a horizontal guy and drop him right there. Put this guy under that guy and this guy under that guy. And now, I'll confess, I do have to go in there and change the thing about whether or not I'm consuming all the widths, because before it kind of made sense. But okay, so since this is supposed to be two columns, I'm going to have to go in here and do that little trick about 0 dp for the width, and then go down here to the layout weight. Remember that guy? And say like 0.5. So it takes up half the room. And then go to here and say I want this guy to be 0 dp and layout weight is 0.5. So now they're roughly half and half. That kind of makes sense. At least it should look like that on the screen. Yeah, half and half. All right, cool. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this guy a second time and making no other changes whatsoever. Let's see what it looks like when it rotates. Okay, so here it is in the portrait mode. And then I do this and ta-da, it comes up and it looks completely different. So I have two completely different layouts. Now, here's the cool part. Because I made a two-column view of this so it would physically fit, I'm still using the exact same thing called ET Display and ET Display 2. In other words, the names of my guys didn't change. And since the names of them didn't change, it should be fairly obvious that inside my code, I didn't have to do anything to make it work for landscape. Because ET Display always went to the one on top or one on the left. And ET Display 2 either went to the one on the bottom or it went to the one on the right. In other words, it didn't matter physically where they were. Okay, so let's revisit the thing that we use in here I'm going to go to the code view for just real quick. So remember how when we give these guys names, they get this little tag, this @ tag, and the @ tag basically means I kind of sort of know what you're talking about, but the plus sign means create an ID if it does not already exist. If it does already exist, then don't create a new one. That's what the plus sign means. So here I have ET display, and in the other one it's exactly the same words. It's still ET display, except this one has a different width and a different layout weight, right? So the attributes are different, but the names remain the same. And as long as the names remain the same, then we can use just talk to this one, and whatever attributes it is, it'll use it. When we talk to this one, whatever attributes it has, it'll use it. Is it in a second column? Is there an extra layout thing like a horizontal guy that we don't have in the other one? That's perfectly okay. Okay? So one more time, that plus sign in the ID means create this as an identifier if it doesn't already exist. But if it does already exist, that's okay. That's what the plus sign means. Cool. So obviously you can manually move things around, and I can move a button over or do something. I can do practically any layout thing I can do. I am free to do practically anything I want, except for I cannot rename a control. I can change what color it is, I can change where it's placed, I can change the words in it. All the attributes of every single button and every single control, every single label can be changed as long as you don't change the name. Okay. On page 586, they talk about detecting the display, which is this stuff that we already did. All right. Next thing we're going to talk about is what's called configuration quantifiers. So I mentioned landscape being one of the things. Well, there's lots of them. We're not going to do them all, but I'm just saying there's one for orientation, which is called normal or landscape. That's kind of cool. They have one for screen size, which is small, normal, or large. So I could have activity main for a small screen and activity main for a large screen. And then there's one for pixel density. Now the pixel density one is easy to see because we already have an icon, okay? We already have an icon that the machine provided for us, right? Whenever we started our application, just created those. But it has the different ones. It has an H DPI and an M and an X and a double X and triple X, and then finally when we got to there's a vector version of this, so there's a way using XML that you can use any DPI, but only if you're using version 26 and higher. And remember, we're at 16. Okay, so you could have an activity main X HDI BI, or you could have an activity main that was XXX HDPI. You could have a combination of small XHDPI landscape, all these kinds of things. Now, we're not going to make one that complicated. So, just curiosity. Let's see what it looks like behind the scenes. When you pop out and look at the Explorer, what am I going to see? Is it really going to have, in the layout file, is it really going to have two files with the same name? What do you think? No, of course not, right? In fact, this will give you a hint of what it's going to look like. In fact, there we go. I don't need to do it. Yeah, I do. Okay, so here's what the actual thing looks like. So this is my Chapter 4 app source main resources. So it created another folder. The layout one has our guy, and then there's a layout -lan, which has the other guy. So they have the same names, they're just in slightly different folders. Just like this guy has mipmap dash, all those guys, right? So they are kept separate, right? All right, so when it comes time to turning in an assignment that has two different layouts, man, you got to make sure you're including both layout files. All right, just saying. Hey, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark.